Have you ever seen the biggest boy band in the world, dripping in absolute luxury, and thought they had it easy? Think again. What if I told you before the fame, they were just 7 broke kids crammed into a tiny room, endlessly mocked by the entire industry? How did rookies from a near-bankrupt, no-name agency rise from the dirt to become undisputed global kings? Was it just pure luck or a brutal, tear-jerking struggle the world never truly saw? Today, we are exposing the shocking, emotional, and mind-blowing true story of BTS's rise from absolute zero to billionaire legends. Are you ready to uncover the hidden scars behind their perfect smiles? Let's dive right into the countdown. Number 7. RM, the underground genius who swallowed his pride for a billion-dollar dream. Imagine being a certified genius with an IQ of 148, placing in the top 1% of the nation in your high school exams, with a guaranteed path to a prestigious university and a life of comfortable luxury, only to throw it all away to join a virtually unknown, broke entertainment company just because you have a burning, relentless passion for hip-hop. This is the raw, unfiltered reality of Kim Nam-joon, better known to the world as RM, the man who became the very foundation upon which the monumental empire of BTS was built. Before the sold-out stadiums and the Grammy nominations, RM was just a teenager known as Runchranda in the gritty underground rap scene of South Korea, battling his way through grimy clubs and facing off against established rappers who dismissed him as just another kid. He had raw talent, a mind sharper than a blade, and a flow that commanded respect. But the moment he made the fateful decision to sign with Big Hit Entertainment, a tiny agency teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, he became a massive target for relentless mockery and brutal betrayal. Can you imagine the agonizing psychological toll of having your own peers, the people you rapped alongside and respected, suddenly turn their backs on you, calling you a sellout and a fake just because you chose the idle path? The underground scene crucified him, labeling him a traitor to hip-hop, who put on makeup and danced for teenage girls, stripping away the street cred he had worked so painstakingly to build. But the insults didn't just come from the outside, they echoed inside the cramped, suffocatingly tiny dormitory that RM shared with 6 other boys, a room so small that they had to sleep bunk to bunk, breathing each other's sweat, surrounded by the constant, suffocating fear that tomorrow might be the day their agency finally goes under and their debut gets canceled forever. As the first member and the undisputed leader of BTS, the weight of the entire group's survival rested heavily on his broad shoulders, forcing him to be the pillar of strength even when he was crumbling inside, crying silently in the bathroom so his younger members wouldn't see his despair. He spent countless sleepless nights in a makeshift, poorly ventilated studio, pouring his blood, sweat, and tears into writing lyrics and producing tracks, desperate to prove their worth to a music industry that looked at them like dirt on their shoes. In those early, agonizing days, BTS was treated as invisible. Their broadcasts were cut, their music was mocked, and they were constantly belittled on variety shows by seasoned industry veterans who saw them as nothing more than poor, irrelevant nobodies from a dirt-poor company with no connections. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to pour your entire soul into a song only to have the public maliciously rip it apart? To the point where RM admitted he used to read hate comments for 5 hours straight just to torture himself with the cruel words of strangers. He internalized the hatred, questioning if his grand sacrifice was a colossal mistake, wondering if he had dragged 6 other innocent boys into a doomed, sinking ship. Yet, amidst this suffocating storm of humiliation and poverty, RM's unyielding resolve never truly shattered. He used the venom spat at him as the very ink for his pen, transforming the raw, agonizing pain of rejection into profound, earth-shattering lyrics that spoke directly to the struggles of an entire marginalized youth generation. He became the voice for the voiceless, rapping about the crushing pressure of society, the depression that no one wanted to talk about, and the fierce rebellion of fighting for your own dreams against impossible odds. His leadership wasn't about barking orders, it was about bleeding first, taking the hardest hits, answering the toughest questions in interviews when they were treated like jokes, and constantly reminding his members who they were and what they were fighting for. Think about the sheer willpower required to stand on a small, poorly lit stage, performing for barely a few hundred people, and still having the audacity to declare that one day you will conquer the world. Is it even humanly possible to endure that level of constant psychological warfare and emerge not just intact, but as one of the most eloquent, respected, and profoundly influential artists of the 21st century? From wearing cheap knockoff clothes and eating budget meals just to survive the day, to standing on the podium of the United Nations, delivering a historic, spine-tingling speech about loving yourself that brought world leaders to tears, RM's journey is the ultimate testament to the indestructible power of the human spirit. He is the mastermind who navigated the treacherous waters of a rigged industry, the shield that protected BTS from the endless barrage of hate, and the brilliant poet who turned their collective trauma into a universal message of hope, proving to every single person who ever looked down on him that true kings aren't born in castles with silver spoons in their mouths. They are forged in the fiery depths of struggle, shaped by the hammer of relentless adversity, and crowned by the sheer, undeniable force of their own brilliance. But let's delve deeper into that agonizing contrast, shall we? Picture this. RM, who once had to share a single cramped bathroom with 6 other teenage boys where the plumbing barely worked and the water would randomly turn freezing cold in the dead of winter, is now a global billionaire icon who resides in a sprawling, multi-million-dollar luxury apartment in the most exclusive neighborhood of Seoul, completely surrounded by his own private collection of museum-grade fine art. How does a young man process that kind of whiplash, transitioning from desperately scraping together loose change to buy a cheap bowl of black bean noodles to literally injecting billions of dollars into the South Korean economy single-handedly? The transformation is so monumental, it almost feels like a cinematic fiction, but every single scar on RM's heart is painfully real. Consider the infamous, heartbreaking moment in their early career during a hip-hop broadcast where RM and Suga were publicly ambushed, humiliated, and aggressively interrogated by veteran rappers who mockingly questioned their masculinity and their dedication to the genre, laughing in their faces while a young RM with a tight, forced smile tried desperately to defend his brothers and his life choices. Most people would have quit right then and there. Most people would have packed their bags, went back to school, and lived a quiet, safe life, hiding from the cruel glare of the public eye. But RM is not most people. He took that burning humiliation, locked it away in the deepest vault of his mind, and used it as an unlimited fuel source for his ambition. He didn't just want to prove them wrong, he wanted to completely obliterate the very system that allowed them to be treated like garbage in the first place. He started studying English fiercely by watching American sitcoms in his tiny dorm, eventually becoming the eloquent, sophisticated global spokesperson for the biggest band in history, effortlessly conversing with world leaders, Grammys hosts, and international media giants, leaving the very people who once mocked his idol status choking on his dust as he soared to untouchable heights. Today, when Kim Nam-joon speaks, the entire world stops and listens. His words have the power to influence global stock markets, shift cultural paradigms, and mobilize millions of fans in the mystical, unstoppable force known as the Army. Number 6. Suga, the starving delivery boy who conquered his demons to buy the world. Have you ever felt so desperately hungry that you had to make a soul-crushing choice between buying a cheap $2 bowl of noodles to stop the agonizing rumbling in your stomach, or using that exact same money to pay for a bus ride back home so you wouldn't have to walk for 2 excruciating hours in the freezing cold? This wasn't a scene from a tragically scripted movie. This was the harsh, brutal, unforgiving everyday reality of Min Yoongi, the man the entire universe now respectfully bows to as Suga of BTS. Before he was casually setting the Billboard charts on fire, before he was sitting front row at Paris Fashion Week, and before he was producing global mega hits for the biggest artists on the planet, Suga was just a starving, desperate kid from the rough streets of Daegu who dared to dream in a world that constantly told him to shut up and wake up. Imagine having a burning passion so intense that it consumes your every waking thought, only to have your own parents violently oppose your dreams, going as far as tearing up your painstakingly handwritten lyric sheets right in front of your tear-filled eyes, simply because they lived in crippling poverty and wanted you to have a normal, stable, predictable life as a government worker. But the roaring fire inside Yoongi was utterly impossible to extinguish, so he made the agonizing, rebellious decision to leave his home against his family's wishes, traveling to the massive, intimidating city of Seoul with absolutely nothing in his pockets but a handful of raw beets and a terrifyingly uncertain future. The reality of chasing his dream in the unforgiving capital was a living, breathing nightmare. He desperately tried selling his meticulously crafted music to underground hip-hop artists, hoping for a breakthrough, but instead of the big break he prayed for, he was mercilessly scammed and robbed of his hard work without seeing a single penny in return, leaving him completely destitute and shivering on the cruel streets of Seoul. To merely survive, buy basic food, and pay his ridiculous university tuition fees, he was forced to take on a grueling, incredibly dangerous part-time job as a motorcycle delivery boy, speeding frantically through the chaotic, rain-slicked traffic while carrying the suffocating weight of his seemingly impossible idle dreams. But cruel fate wasn't done torturing him just yet. One rainy, miserable evening, while rushing frantically to make a delivery on time, the unthinkable nightmare happened. An impatient car violently crashed into his motorcycle, sending his frail, overworked body flying through the air and completely shattering his shoulder upon the brutal impact with the unforgiving asphalt. Can you even begin to comprehend the sheer, blinding terror of lying there broken in the rain, paralyzed by a level of physical agony you didn't know existed, while the only thought screaming in your panicked mind is, "My career is over. The agency is going to kick me out." Terrified that Big Hit Entertainment, a tiny, near-bankrupt company that was already struggling to keep the lights on, would instantly terminate his fragile trainee contract if they found out he was damaged goods, Suga made the heartbreaking, utterly insane decision to hide his severe, life-altering injury from everyone, claiming he merely fell down the stairs. For several agonizing years, he endured silent, excruciating hell, secretly taping up his broken shoulder in the bathroom and forcing himself to perform intense, bone-breaking hip-hop choreography day in and day out, flawlessly masking his physical torment behind a fierce, unyielding stage persona, while his bones literally ground against each other with every single pop and lock. It wasn't until late 2020, long after BTS had already conquered the world and rewritten music history, that he finally underwent the major reconstructive surgery he so desperately needed all those years ago. But the physical pain he endured was only a tiny fraction of the absolute hell he was walking through. The mental and psychological torment was arguably even more devastating and soul-crushing. Behind the tough, impenetrable, cool exterior of the group's lead rapper was a fragile young man violently battling severe clinical depression, crippling social anxiety, and an overwhelming, suffocating sense of worthlessness that threatened to swallow him whole. There were countless nights when the darkness inside his mind was so terrifyingly heavy that he locked himself in a public bathroom, sleeping on the cold, dirty floor, consumed by a paralyzing fear of people and the crushing, unbearable pressure of an impending debut that seemed completely hopeless. He brilliantly took all of this raw, bleeding trauma and poured it directly into his music, eventually birthing his legendary, unfiltered alter ego, August D, and releasing groundbreaking mixtapes that bravely ripped the bandage off his deepest psychological wounds. He rapped aggressively about his psychiatric visits, his suicidal thoughts, and his fierce inner demons in a strictly conservative South Korean society that violently stigmatized mental health and expected idols to be perfect, smiling, plastic dolls. He didn't just sing about superficial love and partying, he screamed at the top of his lungs for the kids who wanted to die, for the marginalized youth who felt crushed by a corrupt capitalist system, and in doing so, he became a beacon of salvation, literally saving millions of lives across the globe while desperately trying to piece together and save his own shattered soul. And oh, how spectacularly, how unbelievably the tables have turned. Look closely at the mind-blowing cinematic climax of this epic tragedy. The boy who couldn't afford a $2 bus ticket is now an absolute, undisputed titan of the global music industry, a ridiculously wealthy billionaire status superstar who literally purchased a sprawling, multi-million-dollar luxury fortress in the ultra-exclusive Hanam UN Village, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in South Korea, with cold, hard cash. From standing awkwardly on the street handing out cheap flyers and begging random strangers to please come to BTS's free concerts, to being appointed as the global brand ambassador for luxury giants like Valentino and the NBA, his glow-up is nothing short of miraculous. Today, legendary, world-renowned musical icons like Coldplay's Chris Martin, Halsey, the late Juice WRLD, and Gangnam Style's Psy literally line up and practically beg for a chance to collaborate with the genius known as Suga the producer, a man who now holds over 150 copyrights under his name and commands an exorbitant fee for a single verse. His monumental revenge against every single person who ever doubted him, including the relatives who told his parents he would fail, is nothing short of legendary and deeply poetic. He didn't just climb the rigged ladder of success, he absolutely obliterated it, built a golden elevator straight to the cosmos, and bought the entire damn building along the way. His breathtaking journey is the ultimate tear-jerking proof that you can be entirely broken, battered, poor, depressed, injured, and feeling entirely alone in the universe, yet still possess the sheer, terrifying willpower and raw talent to rise majestically from the ashes and conquer the entire planet. But the magnitude of his current reality goes even deeper than just luxurious real estate and high-profile collaborations. Think about the sheer unfathomable scale of his recent achievements. Min Yoongi became the very first member of BTS to embark on a massive, globally sold-out solo arena tour, traveling across the world under his August D moniker, effortlessly selling out massive venues in minutes and proving that his raw, unfiltered story resonates with people from every conceivable background, language, and culture. Fans camped outside arenas for days, crying and screaming every single lyric of his deeply personal Korean-language rap songs, perfectly illustrating the supreme dominance he now wields over the international music landscape. Number 5. J-Hope, the smiling street dancer who almost walked away before the miracle. Have you ever plastered a massive, blindingly bright smile across your face to hide the fact that your heart was quietly shattering into a million irreparable pieces? This is the agonizing paradox of Jungkook, the man universally adored as J-Hope, the radiant sunshine and unbreakable dance captain of BTS, whose path to unimaginable billionaire status is paved with hidden tears and almost ended in absolute tragedy. Long before the stadiums chanted his name, Hoseok was a local street dance legend in his hometown of Gwangju, known by the moniker Smile Hoya, a kid who literally lived and breathed rhythm and movement, constantly winning underground dance battles and dreaming of the big stage. But bringing that small-town fame to the ruthless, impossibly competitive idol industry in Seoul was like bringing a butter knife to a gunfight, plunging him into an alien world where his unparalleled dancing skills weren't enough to save him from the crushing reality of his situation. When he joined the severely underfunded and struggling Big Hit Entertainment, an agency so poor they couldn't even afford a proper training facility, he faced a massive, terrifying hurdle. He had absolutely zero experience in rapping or singing. Imagine being thrust into a group heavily focused on gritty, underground hip-hop alongside undeniable prodigies like RM and Suga, feeling completely inadequate and terrified that you're the weak link dragging everyone down into the abyss. He was forced to learn how to rap entirely from scratch, staying up until the sun rose, desperately studying the rhythms and cadences of his members, while simultaneously taking on the grueling, thankless role of the group's unofficial dance master, meticulously correcting the stiff, awkward movements of his inexperienced teammates for hours on end, until their muscles gave out and their feet bled. The sheer suffocating pressure of trying to catch up musically while holding the entire group's performance quality on his back was incredibly toxic to his mental health, pushing him to a devastating breaking point that fans still cry about to this day. Do you know the heart-stopping, tragic story of the day J-Hope actually quit BTS? Consumed by doubt, overwhelming exhaustion, and the terrifying belief that their poverty-stricken agency was doomed to fail, a young, broken Hoseok made the excruciating decision to pack his bags and walk away from his only dream, leaving his members behind in absolute hysterical tears. Can you picture the sheer devastation of a young Jungkook, who was just a child at the time, weeping uncontrollably and violently begging his Hyung not to leave them behind in that suffocatingly tiny dorm? It took RM stepping up, marching straight into the agency's executive office and fiercely declaring, "We absolutely cannot make it without Jungkook," proving that J-Hope wasn't just a member, he was the literal beating heart and vital lifeblood of the entire team. But returning to the group didn't magically erase the suffering. In fact, the nightmare was just beginning. When BTS finally debuted, J-Hope was subjected to a barrage of sickening, unprovoked hate from vicious netizens who brutally attacked his physical appearance, constantly trending malicious hashtags demanding that he be kicked out of the group because he supposedly wasn't handsome enough to be a K-pop idol. How does a human being process that level of concentrated, superficial hatred when all they want to do is share their art with the world? He did it by completely sacrificing his own inner peace, artificially crafting the relentlessly energetic, hyper-positive sunshine persona that we see today, introducing himself as your hope while secretly swallowing the agonizing venom of cyberbullying. He forced himself to be the loudest, the brightest, and the most cheerful member in every single interview and variety show, desperately trying to uplift the morale of his struggling brothers while his own self-esteem was being violently crushed by anonymous cowards behind keyboards. This constant, exhausting performance of happiness, perfectly masked behind a dazzling smile, is arguably one of the most heroic and heartbreaking sacrifices in the history of music. But hold on tight, because the universe has a profoundly beautiful way of rewarding those who walk through hell with a smile, and the vengeance of Jungkook is a glorious spectacle to behold. Look at where that desperately struggling boy from Gwangju is today. J-Hope didn't just survive the vicious snake pit of the entertainment industry, he completely obliterated every single boundary set before him, rising to become a spectacularly wealthy, globally revered fashion icon and absolute musical titan. The boy who was once mocked for his looks and doubted for his musicality made absolute earth-shattering history as the very first South Korean artist to ever headline the main stage of a major U.S. music festival, single-handedly pulling in over 100,000 screaming fans at Lollapalooza and turning the entire city of Chicago into his own personal kingdom, cementing his status as a legendary performer who can effortlessly command a massive global audience completely on his own. From wearing cheap, handed-down stage outfits that were practically falling apart at the seams, to becoming the highly coveted global house ambassador for the ultra-luxurious fashion titan Louis Vuitton, his glow-up is a masterful, jaw-dropping tale of ultimate, undeniable success. He literally bought multiple stunning multi-million-dollar luxury penthouses in the wildly exclusive Seoul Forest Trimmage and Afar Hanggang complexes entirely in cash, establishing himself as one of the wealthiest and most financially powerful idols in the entire South Korean industry. But the most awe-inspiring part of his monumental success isn't the staggering amount of money in his bank account or the custom-made designer wardrobe. It is the fact that he achieved all of this unparalleled glory without ever losing his soul or turning into a bitter, arrogant superstar. He consistently pours his immense wealth back into the world, quietly donating billions of won to support underprivileged children, violence prevention programs, and disaster relief, ensuring that no kid has to suffer in the dark the way he once did. He took all of the agonizing pain, the cruel insults, and the terrifying uncertainty of his youth, and he violently transmuted it into pure, blindingly bright artistry, dropping deeply personal, critically acclaimed solo albums like Jack in the Box that boldly explored the dark, gritty, and complicated shadows lurking behind his famous sunny disposition. J-Hope is the ultimate magnificent proof that sometimes the brightest light is born from the darkest, most suffocating shadows, and that true power isn't about never feeling the pain, it is about feeling the entire world trying to crush you to dust and choosing to relentlessly, fiercely, and beautifully dance right on top of its ruins. Number 4. Jin, the handsome actor who sacrificed his ego to feed a starving family. Have you ever been told that your only value in this world is just your pretty face, and that no matter how hard you work, you will never truly belong among real, raw talent? That was the agonizing, humiliating reality for Kim Seok-jin, universally known as Jin, the eldest member of BTS, whose journey is a staggering testament to quiet, unyielding perseverance in the face of brutal industry prejudice. Unlike the underground rappers who breathed hip-hop since childhood, Jin's story didn't start in a grimy cypher club. It began on the streets of Seoul, where he was quite literally chased down by a casting director simply because he was breathtakingly handsome. He was an acting major at a prestigious university, a polite young man from a comfortable, well-off family who dreamed of starring in movies, completely oblivious to the grueling, cutthroat world of K-pop idol training. When he walked through the doors of the heavily indebted, crumbling big-hit entertainment, he was completely out of his depth, thrust into a chaotic, intensely intimidating hip-hop group where he possessed absolutely zero foundational skills in singing or dancing. Can you imagine the sheer, crushing weight of the imposter syndrome he must have felt, standing awkwardly in a mirrored practice room next to dance prodigies and underground rap legends, fully aware that the company only recruited him to be the visual bait for the group? The industry veterans and vicious netizens immediately labeled him as the useless pretty boy, a talentless filler member who was only there to stand in the center and look good while the others did all the heavy lifting. But the true, hidden tragedy of Jin's early days wasn't just the merciless mockery of his skills, it was the heartbreaking, self-appointed role he took on to keep the group from completely falling apart from starvation and despair. While the company was teetering on the absolute edge of bankruptcy, unable to provide even basic decent meals for their exhausted trainees, Jin completely swallowed his pride and his actor ego to become the desperate caretaker of 6 starving, terrified boys. He literally drove a young, incredibly shy Jungkook to high school, packing his lunches and acting as a surrogate father, completely abandoning his own youthful freedom to ensure that his newfound family survived the brutal, unforgiving trainee days. The sheer, quiet heroism of a young man secretly carrying the domestic and emotional burden of an entire group while simultaneously battling his own deep-seated insecurities is a tear-jerking reality that casual fans rarely ever see. But how did he handle the crushing realization that he was the weakest link on stage? By subjecting himself to a hidden, torturous regimen of endless practice that would have broken a lesser man. While the naturally gifted members were resting, Jin would stay behind in the poorly ventilated, stuffy practice room until the early hours of the morning, repeating the exact same choreography steps thousands upon thousands of times until his knees bruised, his joints swelled, and his muscles completely gave out, desperately trying to force his stiff, untrained body to memorize the grueling hip-hop routines so he wouldn't drag his brothers down. He took vocal lessons with a terrifying religious zeal, refusing to accept the agonizing narrative that he was just a handsome face with a weak voice. The psychological torment of reading hate comments that dismissed his hard work, demanding he leave the group because he was ruining their hip-hop image, cut him deeply, yet he never once let the younger members see him cry. He masked his pain with terrible dad jokes, infectious windshield wiper laughter, and a hilariously exaggerated confidence, purposely acting like a fool just to break the suffocating tension and crippling anxiety in the tiny, cramped dorm they all shared. He became the emotional anchor, the older brother who absorbed the shock waves of their collective stress so the younger members could shine without fear. Fast forward to the present, and the cinematic, jaw-dropping reversal of his fate is enough to give anyone massive, earth-shattering goosebumps. The boy who was once mocked for having a weak, unstable voice completely shattered the entire industry's expectations, transforming into the undeniably powerful, emotionally resonant silver voice of BTS, effortlessly belting out soaring, spine-tingling high notes in legendary solo tracks like Awake and Epiphany that have literally moved tens of thousands of stadium fans to absolute uncontrollable tears. He didn't just catch up to the rest of the group, he became an indispensable powerhouse vocalist whose raw, emotive tone is the absolute backbone of the band's most iconic, heart-wrenching ballads. And let's talk about the mind-numbing, astronomical wealth and power he commands today. The selfless big brother who used to stretch his meager allowance to buy a few cheap scraps of meat for his members is now a staggering, undisputed billionaire-status global icon who literally owns a wildly expensive multi-million-dollar luxury apartment in the ultra-exclusive Hanam the Hill, the absolute pinnacle of high society real estate in South Korea, buying it entirely in cold, hard cash without even breaking a sweat. He has been officially named the global brand ambassador for legendary luxury powerhouses like Gucci and Fred, causing their international websites to instantly crash and their global stocks to soar the exact moment his gorgeous face is associated with their prestigious brands. He carried the Olympic torch in Paris, cementing his status not just as a K-pop idol, but as a deeply respected global dignitary. But the true, unmatched majesty of Kim Seok-jin isn't just in his staggering wealth, his sold-out stadium tours, and his jaw-dropping, worldwide handsome visuals. It is in his unyielding, quiet strength and absolute, unwavering dedication to his country and his team. When he became the very first member of BTS to enlist in the harsh, brutal South Korean military, a moment that had the entire world holding its breath, he didn't demand special celebrity treatment or hide safely behind his colossal fame. He served on the freezing, brutal front lines as an elite, heavily decorated assistant drill instructor, instantly earning the profound, undisputed respect of the entire nation, and proving that his tough, unbreakable character isn't just an act put on for the cameras. The poetic justice of his miraculous journey is absolute perfection. The cutthroat industry that once hastily wrote him off as a talentless, temporary visual has been completely and utterly forced to bow down to a monumental vocal powerhouse, a generous global philanthropist, and a cultural titan who single-handedly proved that exhausting hard work, selfless love, and terrifying, unyielding persistence can completely rewrite your destiny. He turned a quiet, overlooked acting student into a spectacular, world-dominating king who literally bought the very world that once tried to reject him, proving to every single doubter that the ultimate revenge is a life lived in unquestionable, stratospheric, and absolutely dazzling success. Number 3. Jimin, the angelic swan who starved himself for a dream and became the ultimate global it boy. Have you ever wanted something so desperately, so completely, that you were willing to literally starve yourself, push your physical body beyond the absolute limits of human endurance, and risk entirely destroying your own health just for a fragile, agonizingly slim chance at making that dream a reality? This is the harrowing, deeply tragic, yet ultimately spectacular and awe-inspiring true story of Park Jimin, the mesmerizing lead vocalist and main dancer of BTS, whose ethereal grace and breathtaking charm completely hide a past filled with brutal, suffocating self-doubt and agonizing physical torment. Long before he was universally crowned as the undeniable, trend-setting it boy of the global music industry, Jimin was a prodigious, exceptionally gifted top student at the prestigious Busan High School of Arts, mastering the incredibly demanding disciplines of contemporary and classical dance. He was a shining star in his hometown, deeply respected by his teachers, with a secure, highly promising career path as a professional dancer safely laid out before him. But a burning, unquenchable desire to perform on a much grander stage drove him to abandon that safety net, leaving behind his classical roots to plunge headfirst into the terrifying, wildly unpredictable, and cutthroat world of K-pop idol training in Seoul. The transition was nothing short of a living, breathing nightmare. When he finally arrived at the heavily indebted Big Hit Entertainment, he was severely disadvantaged. He was the very last trainee to be added to the BTS lineup, thrust into a group of hardened boys who had been grinding together for years, leaving him with an impossibly short, terrifyingly brief training period of barely 6 months to catch up to their level. Can you even begin to fathom the sheer, crushing psychological terror of waking up every single morning with the suffocating realization that today might be the day the agency executives finally decide you simply aren't good enough? Because for Jimin, that wasn't just a paranoid fear, it was his brutal, everyday reality. He was notoriously kicked out of the final debut lineup a staggering 8 separate times, constantly told that his classical dance style didn't fit the gritty, aggressive hip-hop image of BTS, and that his high-pitched, unique vocal tone was completely unsuitable for their music. Driven to the absolute brink of madness by the terrifying prospect of being sent back home as a miserable failure, Jimin subjected himself to a level of extreme, torturous overwork that genuinely terrified his fellow members. While the rest of the group slept for a meager few hours in their cramped, suffocatingly tiny dorm, Jimin would stay behind in the freezing, poorly lit practice room until 3 or 4 in the morning, aggressively drilling the exact same popping and locking routines until his muscles spasmed violently, his throat bled from forced vocal exercises, and he eventually collapsed from sheer exhaustion, grabbing just 2 hours of sleep on the cold, hard studio floor before waking up to do it all over again. But the absolute darkest, most heartbreaking chapter of Jimin's desperate struggle for survival wasn't just the grueling lack of sleep, it was the terrifying, life-threatening war he waged against his own physical body. In a superficial, incredibly toxic industry that demanded absolute visual perfection, Jimin was mercilessly targeted by vicious online trolls who maliciously mocked his perfectly normal, healthy baby fat, calling him chubby and unworthy of standing next to his handsome members. The relentless, cruel bullying completely shattered his self-esteem, triggering a devastating period of severe body image issues that drove him to enact the now infamous, highly dangerous diet. Imagine the sheer, unimaginable agony of aggressively practicing high-intensity hip-hop choreography for over 15 hours a day while surviving on absolutely nothing but one single meager meal every 10 days, completely starving his rapidly deteriorating body to the point where he would literally black out and collapse during rehearsals, completely terrifying his brothers who frantically begged him to eat. He was willingly destroying himself, shedding massive amounts of weight just to fit into the impossibly cruel mold that the industry demanded, hiding his agonizing hunger pains behind a devastatingly perfect, angelic smile whenever the cameras rolled. He cried silently in the cramped bathroom, utterly convinced that he was a burden to the group, completely oblivious to the fact that his unparalleled work ethic and breathtaking, gravity-defying dance moves were rapidly becoming the absolute magnetic center of BTS's explosive stage presence. Think about the breathtaking, legendary moment at the MMA Awards when he performed an ethereal, gravity-defying traditional fan dance, mesmerizing millions of viewers worldwide and single-handedly earning a massive plaque of appreciation from the South Korean government for elegantly spreading their ancient culture across the globe. How does a young man who was once viciously told his dance style was entirely useless for a K-pop group end up becoming the absolute, undisputed pride of his entire nation? It is because he took every single cruel insult, every agonizing rejection, and every single drop of venom spat at him and used it as the fiery fuel to completely reinvent himself. He meticulously crafted an on-stage persona that is so fiercely captivating, effortlessly blending raw masculine power with delicate, fluid grace, that he completely shattered the rigid, toxic gender norms of the conservative Asian entertainment industry, becoming a universally adored muse for countless international artists, fashion designers, and acclaimed movie directors. Fast forward through years of literal blood, sweat, and endless tears, and the cinematic, jaw-dropping metamorphosis of Park Jimin is enough to leave the entire world in a state of absolute breathless shock. The boy who nearly killed himself to lose weight and who was almost discarded by his agency 8 times is now a staggering, undisputed billionaire status global superstar whose mere existence completely paralyzes the internet and effortlessly dictates global fashion trends. From wearing cheap, unbranded clothes and crying over his own reflection, Jimin has miraculously ascended to become the highly coveted global brand ambassador for absolute titans of ultimate luxury like Dior and Tiffany & Co., single-handedly causing Dior's global stock to skyrocket to an all-time historical high the exact moment his jaw-dropping campaign photos were released to the world. He didn't just survive the vicious, highly critical music industry, he completely conquered it,
making mind-blowing historic waves by becoming the very first South Korean solo artist in the history of music to debut at #1 on the ultra-competitive US Billboard Hot 100 chart with his synth-pop masterpiece Like Crazy, firmly proving that his uniquely beautiful, honey-toned voice is actually his most powerful and deeply beloved weapon. And let's talk about the astronomical, staggering wealth that now surrounds the boy who used to sleep on a dirty studio floor. Today, Jimin resides in absolute untouchable luxury, having purchased a sprawling multi-million-dollar mega apartment in the wildly exclusive 9-1 Hanam complex, often dubbed the Beverly Hills of Korea, paying the exorbitant, eye-watering price tag entirely in cold, hard cash without a single drop of hesitation. Yet despite commanding a level of wealth and global influence that rivals international royalty, he remains the incredibly sweet, deeply empathetic fairy of the group, always the very first one to rush over and fiercely hug a crying member, profoundly understanding the terrifying depths of their pain because he literally walked through that exact same hell himself. He quietly donates billions of won to desperately underfunded schools, pediatric cancer foundations, and polio eradication programs, using his massive, hard-earned fortune to passionately protect the vulnerable youth of today so they never have to experience the suffocating despair he once felt.
Number 2. V, the hidden farm boy who shattered the world's beauty standards. Have you ever been completely erased from the picture, treated as an invisible ghost by the very people who were supposed to be your new family, while you desperately watched from the shadows as everyone else lived out the exact dream you were promised? This was the heartbreaking, intensely isolating reality for Kim Tae-young, universally known today as V, the baritone-voiced visual king of BTS, who went from dirt-poor obscurity to becoming the absolute undisputed most handsome man in the entire world. Long before the tailored Celine suits, the exclusive Cartier campaigns, and the blinding flash of paparazzi cameras in Paris, Tae-young was just a simple, innocent farm boy from a poverty-stricken rural village in Daegu, raised by his deeply loving but financially struggling grandmother for over half his life. He literally thought his ultimate destiny was to become a farmer, spending his days pulling weeds, helping his family survive the harsh winters, and dreaming of nothing more than simply making enough money to keep his family fed and happy. He didn't have the luxury of expensive vocal coaches, elite dance academies, or a silver spoon in his mouth. He simply tagged along to a big-hit entertainment audition just to support a friend, completely out of pure curiosity, wearing a cheap, tattered jacket that his mother had desperately bought for him, saving up for months just so the rich city kids wouldn't bully her precious son for looking poor. Out of sheer, unbelievable fate, the casting director spotted him in the crowd, practically begging him to audition on the spot, and he shockingly became the only person from Daegu to pass that day, leaving his friend behind and stepping into a terrifying alien world in Seoul. But the true, agonizing nightmare began the exact moment he signed that trainee contract. In a bizarre, incredibly cruel marketing strategy devised by the near-bankrupt agency, Tae-young was officially designated as the hidden member of BTS, a closely guarded secret meant to build anticipation, but for a young, desperately lonely teenager, it felt like absolute crushing abandonment. For an excruciatingly long time, while the other 6 members were excitedly filming daily video logs, interacting with early fans, and building a collective, unbreakable brotherhood, V was strictly forced to stay entirely out of frame, literally hiding in the corner of the room or standing completely off camera, watching his brothers laugh and connect with the world while he was completely silenced, erased, and ignored.
Can you even begin to imagine the sheer suffocating psychological torment of writing long, heartfelt letters to fans that you weren't actually allowed to post, recording solo video logs that would never be uploaded to the internet, and crying yourself to sleep in that cramped, sweaty, poorly ventilated dorm because you genuinely believed the company was going to cut you from the final debut lineup at the very last second? The isolation was so intensely painful that he openly admitted he would stand alone by the trash cans just to watch the other members film their group content, feeling like a useless, forgotten outcast who didn't truly belong in this shiny new world. When he was finally revealed to the public just mere weeks before their debut, the initial reaction was brutally indifferent, leaving him to desperately claw his way up from the absolute bottom, working twice as hard just to prove that he wasn't merely a pretty face thrown in for visual appeal. But his devastatingly handsome looks quickly became a massive double-edged sword. The vicious, highly toxic K-pop industry constantly tried to box him into the rigid role of a brainless, eccentric visual, maliciously mocking his unique way of speaking and completely dismissing his deep, soulful, incredibly raspy baritone voice as being too unusual, too thick, and not pop enough for mainstream Korean audiences. They desperately wanted him to sound like everyone else, to blend into the manufactured machine, but Taehyung fiercely refused to lose his soul, holding on to his incredibly deep love for classical jazz, vintage soul music, and artistic photography, fiercely channeling the raw emotional pain of his impoverished childhood into his mesmerizing art. The ultimate, soul-crushing tragedy struck him right in the middle of BTS's meteoric, explosive rise to global fame, a devastating moment that completely shattered his heart into a million irreparable pieces. While he was thousands of miles away in the Philippines, performing in front of screaming, adoring fans, and finally tasting the absolute peak of success he had bled for, his beloved grandmother, the incredible woman who had raised him, protected him, and loved him when he was just a poor farm kid in Daegu, tragically passed away. He wasn't even able to attend her funeral properly or hold her frail hand one last time because of his suffocating, inescapable idol schedules, forcing him to stand on stage under the blinding stadium lights, smiling and waving at the massive crowd, while his soul was literally screaming in absolute unendurable agony. He kept the secret completely locked away in his heart for months, silently bleeding out on stage, until he eventually broke down in front of tens of thousands of fans in a stadium, weeping uncontrollably as he publicly confessed his devastating loss, revealing the horrific, bloody price of fame that ruthlessly demands you surrender your humanity for the sake of the show. Yet it was precisely this profound, raw vulnerability and incredibly deep emotional well that transformed him into an absolute, unstoppable global phenomenon. Look at the staggering, jaw-dropping empire that Kim Tae-young commands today. The boy who thought he would spend his entire life pulling weeds on a dusty farm is now a staggering multi-millionaire billionaire status titan who completely paralyzes the global economy with a single casual Instagram post. The desperately poor kid who wore cheap, fake designer clothes just to fit in with his peers is now the ultra-exclusive global brand ambassador for absolute titans of luxury like Celine and Cartier, causing entire luxury collections worth millions of dollars to sell out worldwide in a matter of minutes, single-handedly crashing massive corporate websites with his terrifying, undeniable selling power. He resides in a spectacular, insanely expensive luxury penthouse in the elite Applebaum complex in Gangnam, a fortress of absolute opulence surrounded by world-class art, proving that his jaw-dropping glow-up is nothing short of a cinematic masterpiece. From completely obliterating Guinness Book of World Records by gaining millions of Instagram followers faster than any human being on the history of the planet, to releasing critically acclaimed, deeply personal jazz-infused solo albums like Layover that effortlessly dominated the global charts and showcased his breathtaking velvety vocals, V's spectacularly triumphant journey completely redefines the very meaning of absolute success. He took the immense, agonizing pain of being a hidden, forgotten farm boy and aggressively forged it into a blinding, untouchable crown of global supremacy, forcefully proving to the entire universe that true beauty isn't just about having a mathematically perfect face. It is about possessing a beautifully resilient, unyielding soul that absolutely refuses to stay hidden in the shadows, boldly and unapologetically stepping into the blinding light to completely and utterly conquer the entire damn world.
Number 1. Jungkook, the terrified child who carried the weight of an empire. Have you ever been forced to leave the safe, warm embrace of your parents when you were just a fragile, terrified child, completely throwing away your youth to carry the crushing, suffocating weight of an entire failing company on your tiny shoulders? This is the heart-stopping, magnificent climax of our countdown, the ultimate story of Jungkook, the undisputed golden maknae of BTS, whose journey from a weeping, painfully shy middle schooler to an absolute untouchable global pop deity is arguably one of the most phenomenal and terrifying coming-of-age stories in the history of music. Imagine being a 13-year-old kid from Busan, possessing a raw, unpolished talent so terrifyingly immense that after participating in a local singing audition show, you were aggressively scouted and fiercely hunted down by 7 of the biggest, richest, and most powerful entertainment agencies in South Korea, all dangling guaranteed fame, luxurious dorms, and massive budgets right in front of your face. But instead of choosing the easy, guaranteed path to stardom, a young, starry-eyed Jungkook made the most spectacularly insane and brilliant gamble of his life. He rejected all the massive industry titans and chose to sign with the incredibly poor, virtually unknown, and deeply indebted Big Hit Entertainment simply because he was absolutely mesmerized by the raw, underground hip-hop aura of RM. He literally bet his entire life, his childhood, and his future on a broke teenage rapper, packing his bags and leaving his heartbroken family behind to move into a suffocatingly tiny, mold-infested single-room dorm with 6 older, intimidating strangers. The culture shock and the intense, agonizing homesickness were so severe that Jungkook would literally wait until all of his hyungs had fallen deeply asleep, listening to their heavy breathing in the cramped bunk beds before quietly sneaking into the tiny, freezing bathroom just to wash his hair while weeping uncontrollably, desperately missing his mother and terrified of the monumental choice he had made. His social anxiety was so incredibly crippling that if someone asked him to sing, he would immediately burst into tears, paralyzed by a terrifying lack of self-confidence that made the agency executives seriously doubt if he would ever possess the necessary courage to debut on a public stage. Can you even comprehend the sheer horrifying pressure of being officially designated as the Golden Maknae, the secret weapon of the group, who was strictly expected to flawlessly excel at absolute everything: main vocal, lead dancer, sub-rapper, center, while still navigating the confusing, turbulent hormones of puberty? He wasn't just growing up in the spotlight, he was being forcefully molded in the most brutal, unforgiving pressure cooker imaginable, absorbing the severe financial anxiety of his company and the intense burning desperation of his older members, taking it completely upon himself to ensure that their collective dream didn't die.
Because he was the youngest, he internalized every single ounce of their pain, famously breaking down in a rare, agonizing moment of vulnerability and confessing to his older brothers that he didn't care about the grueling physical exhaustion of their schedules. His only true, unbearable hardship was having to stand helplessly by and watch his beloved Hyungs suffer in silence. He pushed his own physical body far past the absolute limits of human survival just to make them proud, creating terrifying, heart-stopping moments for the fans and his members alike, like during their grueling Wings World Tour in Chile, where Jungkook aggressively overworked himself in the suffocating heat to the point of a terrifying full-body collapse. Imagine the sheer horror of watching this incredible, talented young man gasping desperately for air in the chaotic backstage area, requiring an emergency oxygen mask and heavy medical intervention, his face completely drained of color, only to fiercely refuse to go to the hospital because he absolutely refused to disappoint the thousands of screaming fans who had waited their entire lives to see him. He literally dragged his battered, exhausted, oxygen-deprived body right back up onto the stage the exact second his cue hit, pasting on a devastatingly perfect, radiant smile and executing the grueling choreography so flawlessly that the audience had absolutely no idea he was secretly dying on the inside. That is not just talent, that is a terrifying, superhuman level of dedication and sheer, unyielding grit that completely defies logic and reason. He sacrificed his entire adolescence, missing out on normal high school memories, first loves, and teenage freedom, permanently fusing his entire identity with BTS so deeply that he often admitted he genuinely didn't know who he was without them. The public saw a flawless prodigy, but behind the scenes, he was a deeply anxious perfectionist who would literally break down into tears of frustration in the dressing room if his voice cracked even a fraction of a semitone during a live performance. This agonizing pursuit of absolute perfection drove him to isolate himself in the recording booth for countless hours, completely depriving himself of sleep, fiercely determined to become an indestructible vocal powerhouse that could flawlessly anchor the most demanding tracks. But oh, just look at the spectacular, universe-shattering metamorphosis that has unfolded from that crucible of tears and sweat. The terrified, crying boy who used to shower in the dark so no one would hear him weep has brutally and flawlessly evolved into a staggering, heavily tattooed, lip-pierced, absolute, undisputed king of the global pop industry, completely destroying everything in his path. Jungkook didn't just conquer the K-pop industry, he effortlessly transcended it, stepping onto the most colossal stages on the entire planet, including completely mesmerizing billions of viewers worldwide when he single-handedly opened the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, asserting an unbelievable level of global dominance that most artists can only hallucinate about. From eating cheap convenience store sausages because the agency couldn't afford proper meat, he is now an outrageously wealthy billionaire status mogul who casually dropped billions of won in pure cash to buy a massive, sprawling luxury mega mansion in the ultra-exclusive, insanely wealthy neighborhood of Itaewon, literally building a multi-story fortress right in the heart of South Korea's most expensive real estate. He was violently crowned as the ultimate global ambassador for Calvin Klein, breaking the entire internet and causing their international sales to absolutely skyrocket into the stratosphere the exact millisecond his jaw-dropping, confident campaign dropped. When he finally unleashed his highly anticipated solo music to the world, he didn't just chart, he absolutely obliterated the ultra-competitive US Billboard Hot 100, debuting at a staggering #1 with his massive, inescapable mega-hit 7, effortlessly smashing global Spotify streaming records that had been firmly held by Western industry titans for years. His massive solo album Golden didn't just break records, it completely shattered the ceiling of what a South Korean soloist could ever achieve in the highly gate-kept Western pop market. The sheer poetic magnitude of his glow-up is absolutely breathtaking. He took the intense, suffocating pressure of an entire empire, the brutal, terrifying expectations of a cutthroat industry, and the agonizing, homesick tears of his youth, and he forged them all into an indestructible, bulletproof armor of absolute global invincibility. He represents the ultimate spectacular triumph of raw talent meeting terrifying, unyielding hard work, firmly standing at the absolute pinnacle of human success while fiercely remaining the same deeply humble, fiercely loyal boy who still profoundly bows 90 degrees to everyone he meets. Jungkook's unbelievable journey from a terrified, introverted child to a spectacularly wealthy, world-conquering musical deity is the perfect, tear-jerking conclusion of the phenomenal, blood-stained, and deeply inspirational saga of BTS, definitively proving to the entire universe that true legends aren't just born, they are forged in the agonizing, beautiful fires of relentless struggle, completely rewriting the stars and demanding that the entire world endlessly chant their legendary names.